lot of garlic. I have been gargling holy water, and I'm wearing a lot of silver. So I feel like I'm safe.
I can kind of smell
the garlic and the silver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty good. I've built a safe zone and taken all the precautions necessary. How about
important.
you? What are you doing? What's your COVID-19 regimen?
I'm holding my breath a lot. I'm trying to stay away from,
do the
people
test.
like you. Yeah.
Like we each have to hold our breath for 10 seconds to see if we've got it.
That's right.
Okay, this is bad TV. So, maybe I haven't. What are we talking about today?
Today, so this is the Spin Out series, where, just as a recap, we're talking about how you could take your service business that might be facing some challenging times, as it is today, and turn that into some opportunity. And so, given today's climate, innovation is always going to win out. And I think it's important, this was always important, but be looking at where there are holes in your marketplace, where opportunities exist, and what assets do you have to create some value in different scalable ways. So service industries, it can be a tough game, especially when things change in the, culturally, globally right now. So we are talking the concept of spin out. So how do you take concepts, processes, knowledge within your service business, and how do you turn that into something that you can turn into a product and that you can scale?
Yeah.
I think the growth piece is important there, to be considering something that you can do that is scalable. So, do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think for services businesses, this idea of being able to create a product, especially again today, where you're building something that can scale, serve a purpose, do that at a wide range of people online is a great opportunity. And so today, with us talking about kind of the operational and legal thinking behind this, after we've talked about all these other things, this is really just to get people in the mindset of some of the considerations that they have to take in.
For sure, because it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of the big ideas.
Right.
And the sales and marketing side is exciting. There are the pieces that you have to have your bases covered when it comes to operational, legal, and be prepared, and that may not be an area of strength. And so just to have it thought through so that you're prepared, that you can kind of roll out the infrastructure appropriately, that's really what we're talking about today.
Yeah, totally. So let's dive in. So we've got 4 key areas for operations.
Yeah.
Location, where are you going to do business physically and online? Obviously if you're building a product that's scalable, you don't necessarily have to have a physical location.
Yeah.
If you're a service business, you may already have one, but our clients are having a wide range of different, scenarios where employees can be spread across the country, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Obviously delivering online, equipment, the tools that you need to get the job done, labor, who are the people and the resources to do everything, which is a big topic in itself, and then the process, the way you get business done, systems for quality control, what's that software that you're using to really run the business day to day. So
in a couple of the clients that we've worked with in building out this type of spin out product, one of the things that we figured it into kind of when we were planning is we realized that all of these things were going to start from their existing business, but then there were areas where, as they launch the product and it gets out there, there's going to be need for like more people, more like on the support side of things, and we'll talk about some of those specifics.
And even sales, we've had companies that have a service business, they're using themselves as the sales team, but at some point wanting to spin that out into its own separate resource just for the product. And then support was another big one. And so really thinking through that process in the initial stages, are you leveraging those resources internally with your business? Is that considered an investment from that company to do that? And then also figuring out your finances associated to hiring those people, because sometimes we can think about the revenue from a product but not the expense because we're thinking of it in our current business. And so sometimes you have to do that forecasting that really makes sure that you're looking at what the true expense is going to be. for this business as it grows.
Yeah, and when you put it down on a spreadsheet, it might look differently than where you're anticipating. There's probably things that weren't considered when you first, were drawing up the ideas in your head. Putting it down is going to give you that clarity. Go back to this point here. You might start off with using your existing location.
Yeah.
You might start with an existing team member that's handling support, but then as you scale, it doesn't make sense to physically house it. There's so much talk right now about remote work, right? And if you're not in a service business, if you're selling software or something like that, like what we're talking about here, there's not necessarily a reason to have to do that in your physical location. And so that gives you flexibility and the opportunity to do things might be easier to go about it by hiring someone who's elsewhere.
100%.
So those are the type of things that you'll want to plan out, not just when you're launching, but think of with your growth, what you'll need to support your team, your product, the service, and so those are some of the basics.
I agree. Move on. So talking about customer support, you just mentioned this in figuring out, it's one of the biggest things, and I sometimes think people overlook it when they're looking at developing a product, is that there is going to be support needed, and I think people underestimate how many questions and concerns or training or even processing orders and billing and potentially refunds and all of these things that happen with having a legitimate product business. You're not necessarily thinking of, and so you really have to plan operationally for how are you going to handle this. What are the different channels? We've talked about customer support in the past, but what are the channels? Who are the people? How are you going to handle all of these different pieces?
Yeah, and then when thinking about, okay, so you have someone on a team who's going to handle the support requests. Well, just realize though that your level 1 support, just fielding the request, being able to answer simple questions, that's one thing. But then, if there's something that requires a developer to look into, some code behind some function that's not working properly, that's not going to be that initial person. And maybe you're thinking you're going to bring someone on new and just maybe fairly entry level. They're not going to be able to get into those areas where there's deep expertise required. So you want to think through kind of who's available and how is that going to work as you go about it. I just think a lot of this is thinking through each of these elements, segmenting things out and understanding it's not, customer service isn't just customer service. Oh, well, Andy, I'll handle the customer service.
Yeah.
If I don't have that, side on the, development or even the subject matter expertise of whatever the solution you're delivering, I can't do everything.
Right.
I might be able to field those, but who do I go to and how does that person get trained to know?
Yeah.
There's a lot to it. But
and the systems that are used to do that and manage it. I mean, the nice thing about products today, especially online ones, is there are a number of tools that can really help you streamline, manage, organize a lot of these things, but that is, again, expense, and someone's still going to have to manage it. It's not going to just do it for you. So there's ways to clean it up.
Yeah, for sure. And then similar things with onboarding and training, kind of what are those levels for both supporting your users. Then if you have people internally, you got to onboard and train those people as well. So thinking about process for that. And then the point here, ongoing development, is whatever you're fielding customer support, that's like you said, customer support, it's plays such a role in different ways. Development, right? If you're getting the same questions, maybe that's a tip off to, oh wow, that's a feature perhaps that we can put on the roadmap, or hey, maybe there's a different way for us to do things.
Yeah.
So funneling and making sure for developmental considerations, those ideas are being fielded and at least seeing there's some awareness of what's coming in.
Yeah, and one of the other things I see with a lot of companies in the early stages, at least, as they're getting these requests, sometimes they can get pushed to development, and there's features that are starting to be built, and they're not part of the roadmap. And so making sure you've got the right checks and balances, that you don't get a support call into Joe. Joe tells the developer this person's having an issue. That developer starts working on something, and all of a sudden you're putting time, effort into maybe something that was a different issue.
Yeah, great point.
So, yeah, it's interesting. And then this one, of course, which is, what's the structure? And we see this a lot with our clients that are existing businesses and trying to create these new products is, what are you going to do with the entity and the IP protection? How are you going to handle data privacy? And whether it's exit planning or even investment, looking at those different things. So we've had clients talk about keeping the product within their own business, spinning it out into its own LLC, looking at investors or not. And one of the challenges with that is, if you've got an existing business, how does that investor play into just that product or your business? And will they even think that you've got the time to make it successful if you're trying to do something else and this is just a spin out? So there's a lot of things to consider with structure early on. Is, do we want to truly spin this out? And then what does that mean for how we might want to grow it, get investments, sell it? How are we going to protect all that data as well? So lots of considerations in the structure part.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say the exit planning one, to that point of, if you're looking at the entity, if it's part of it, if it's part of your existing business, how does that play out if you're going to if you want to sell the business? Do you want to sell this new spin out, or do you want to sell the service business? Both? Are you going to find out someone that would either invest or buy both businesses? So it's just a lot to...
Yeah, especially again, if you're in an existing business versus this is a whole brand new thing. There are just a ton of legal considerations to think through, and then that long term. I've heard from investors in the past, when they're dealing with existing businesses trying to create a product, they don't want to invest, and the main reason tends to be is there's not going to be enough focus on the product, and they're not interested in the primary business, or the business owner doesn't want investment for that part. And I understand it, because if I'm an investor and you say, well, we've got this great product that we're spinning out, it has huge opportunity, do you want to invest in just that? Well, if you're making the lion's share of your current pay and revenue through this other company, well, what happens if you're needed over there? You're going to drop this because it's too brand new. And so it can be very challenging to find any sort of investment if you really want to scale a spin-out product, unless you have the right connections, or you've structured it correctly, or you've hired in maybe someone that's fully dedicated to it. So lots of things to think about.
For sure. It's an area you want to get, you probably want to talk to an attorney who has experience with this. There are people who specialize in, IP protection and structuring entities. Definitely want to get some guidance with that, especially if this is, first time that you're spinning out a product. I think it almost becomes, sometimes people have an idea for software, just something that you and I think is something totally unrelated to this business. Okay, that's one thing. But I think all of this gets trickier in a spin-out business, because how are they related? They feel so much ingrained, and that could be good, that could be bad, but you got to work it out.
Right. Well, and I think that gets to having the four primary areas. You've got, a development team, whether you're doing that internally or you're working with someone, marketing, where you're, again, for brand and how you're going to grow it and sell it, and that marketing and sales piece, accounting, how are you going to handle the finances and forecasting and figuring out, how does that implicate your existing business, and investment from your existing company into this new company, and how that gets handled for tax. And then obviously legal for your entity structure and protections, and understanding how that might impact future investment and stuff. And so those four, making sure that you either have the internal knowledge for them, or using the right partners to make sure that if you're going to spin this out, you're doing it right. So
that's good stuff. For sure.
So that's kind of the operations. I mean, there's obviously a ton more. I mean, you could go really deep into that, but it really is about the money, the legal structure, the people, how are you going to handle it near term and long term, and thinking through that. And there's just, creating a product spin out is great, but it's important, I think, in those upfront stages to make sure you're thinking of all of these different pieces, and thinking about it like, if it is a very successful product, what are all those roles that you need? How are you going to manage them? how are they part of your existing business? You know, how is that going to tie into all this investment stuff? So a lot of things to think about in operations and legal, but I think the key is don't skip over it.
Yep.
Cool. So I think next week we're talking about building. So we've talked a lot about a lot of things on spin outs, of coming up with ideas and how you understand the market opportunity into this, you know, operations and legal. Now we're going to get into the actual, like, okay, let's build something prior to starting to put it out to the market and marketing it. So we've got a couple more episodes coming up, and they should be pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Looking forward to it. Hope everyone has a great weekend.
Stay safe, eat your garlic.
Yeah, don't be social.
That's right.
Gotta be distancing, but
cool.
Everyone's doing their part. We'll see you guys here next week.
Yeah,
have
we'll
a
see
good
you.
one.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care.